Hello again to Our Texas, the podcast. Today, our discussion is about white rage and white fragility. We have four guests with us. Dr. Stacy Stewie, professor of English at Tarrant County College, the Northeast campus. She's been a part of TCC for over 20 years. Then there's Mary Huggins, a Northeast campus student advisor, and she's been around for about 10 years. And then we have Chris Hunt, a veterans counselor at Northeast Campus, but he's also a U.S. veteran and veteran of the Desert Storm. And then and he also has he's a therapist in private practice. He's done that since about 1998. And then lastly, we have Dr. James Bernardo, former psychology professor here at the Tarrant County's Northeast campus, currently a counselor on campus and a therapist in private practice for over 20 years. I believe he also indicated that for more than 21 years, he had been, as he called it, the Chitlin Circuit, a instructor, a professor at four of the HBCUs in the United States, Jarvis Christian, Howard University, what are the other two?
Philander and Lincoln in Missouri.
Okay, all right. Dr. Stewie, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Miss Huggins, may I just say Mary?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Welcome here. And Chris, we've had a chance to talk from time to time. Good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet, you bet. Now, there are two books that came to their attention, and they gave it to my attention. And so we're going to talk about these two recent books. One is titled White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide, and the other, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Both books have received praise from various news outlets, with White Rage listed on the New York Times bestseller list. White Fragility has a foreword from the well-known author and professor Michael Eric Dyson. So one of the first questions that I have is, what are the challenges of talking to white Americans about racism? Who would like to go first, Mary or Stacy?
I've been reading the book White Fragility.
Yes.
And the author, Robin DiAngelo, talks about some of the challenges with talking to white Americans about racism. Mm-hmm. She says that often we've equated the word racism with evil. Mm-hmm. And so people get very defensive and they shut down. They don't want to talk about it.
Okay. All right. Who else has seen a difficult time in talking to white Americans about racism?
Just mere acceptance of the topic and not being fearful, because it's something that we have to deal with if we want to make America better.
Okay. You had something, Chris?
Sure. I was going to just suggest that my experience, both internally and externally, is that there's some very, very damning evidence that I think people don't want to be true, and so they avoid looking at it. Mm-hmm. And it also, because those things are true, challenges status quo, and it means that we're going to have to do something different. And we human beings dislike change, and we avoid uncertainty at almost all costs. And so I think those are some of the reasons.
Okay. How about you, Mary? Do you make a distinction between racism and white supremacy?
Excuse me. Yes. I do think racism comes in all forms, because it can also be religion. It doesn't just have to be a skin color. And white supremacy, I've always known it to be, someone who thinks that because their race is white, they find that they are superior to other people, and they bestow very hatred acts on individuals. And as a society, even going back to the first question, we really have to recognize that this is just something that's been kind of pushed under the mat for years. And so we really need to be part of our duties as Americans, we have to address these issues and discuss them, and teach our children that it's not okay, and that with time and learning and being open, that we can all get along.
Okay. How has mass media helped us understand racism? How has mass media, whether it's books, whether it's television, whether it's movies, how has it helped us understand racism?
Well, I typically end up being the problem child anyway, so I'll say that I don't think that it has. I think it's, especially recently, I think it's been very polarizing, and I don't know that it has been nurturing of an environment that says, we need to sit down and really listen to one another and understand things, not only subjective experiential truth, but also factual truth. We need to take a look at the whole truth and hear one another. And so I would say that, my experience and understanding of it recently is that it's not been, nurturing of understanding, but divisive.
How about you,
Stacy.
Stacy, pardon me.
I was just thinking about some of the controversy regarding the Oscars last year. And I think the big question was why aren't our African American actors and actresses getting the recognition that they deserve? Often there are so many white actors and actresses being recognized, and maybe an absence of recognition for African American actors and actresses and directors.
Many times their voices indicate that there are so few good roles, meaty roles. So maybe that could explain it. Maybe it also explains for those who are Latino or those who are Asian American, that sort of thing. Mary, how do you think race shapes the lives of white Americans?
Well, I do think for a long time, white was the dominant race. And so with that, there's this automatic sense of dominancy. And so I think that over time, that's a mindset. And so they live their life with that mindset of dominancy, and they exude that onto other people. And you can't do that, because there's no one race that's dominant over another.
Well, how do they get that comfort level about their dominance?
It's just,
how does it come out in ways that maybe they're not aware of? Yes, Mary. Stacy, pardon me.
I think often white people have the luxury or the privilege of not having to worry about race. And then maybe there's some education that needs to happen to realize that's white privilege, not having to worry about things that some people have to worry about.
Okay, all right. James?
There's been a continuous and constant perpetuation of the skin color of white being superior. And the media has really kind of continuously reinforced that through stereotypes.
Maybe standardized, okay.
And the standards of beauty and all the criteria as to who is in the dominant role is continuously perpetuated by the media.
Chris, how has racial issues triggered white rage? Maybe that's a too complicated question, but...
Well, that's the whole story of the book, White Rage, is the answer. So I won't duplicate the effort that's already been nicely done, but I think it triggers it. Again, I think that there are much of the Anglo population that are just happy to be contentedly ignorant and just go on and pretend as if it's not a real issue. And then secondly, again, happily I've got some people who care a lot about me and are willing to invest and be vulnerable with me and share some of their experiences and feelings, and it's made a difference to me in my heart in a lot of different ways. But I really do think that there are many, many Caucasian folks that we just wish that it wasn't true, or we relegate it to a previous part of history that doesn't carry on to today, and and just kind of happily, blissfully ignorant about it. And so when people push the issue, I think it causes a great deal of discomfort, anxiety, and even fear, because the truth is very, very painful.
Stacy, how have racial issues triggered white rage?
I hate to bring up politics, but there's an example that comes to mind, and especially with President Obama during his tenure, there was an unbelievable amount of anger, a response to President Obama from a certain segment of the population that was surprising. And it makes you wonder, it made me wonder, where does that energy come from? Where did that energy come from? Sometimes I wonder if there wasn't a connection with race.
Do you recall an instance where you thought it was manifesting? Whether he was, the one thing that comes to mind is when he was giving the State of the Union, and I forget, the representative from a southern state yelled out, "You lie." And I've been around a few years, and I've yet to hear a person from Congress make such a demonstrable statement during a State of the Union that was personal. And I'm wondering if either one of you have seen something similar that was public, either about his presidency during the time he was there, or anybody on the state level. Have you seen some kind of racial insensitivity directed towards somebody in a public way?
I personally haven't seen anything that's been so dramatic.
Okay.
I think it projects the ultimate of disrespect.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that he is multiracial, that was de-emphasized, and his illumination of his Afrocentric background seemed to be more of an issue than anything else. He was raised by white people, that is,
His mother and also her parents. Yeah.
And that was minimized instead of illuminated.
I recall Michelle Obama being talked about by one of the people in Congress, especially her rear end, and how he had certain thoughts about it. And so I don't recall another first lady having been the subject of discussion that made public.
Yeah, and that's stereotypic.
Yeah.
Saying that black women got big rear ends, but rear ends are big in any race.
Other than on a public level, have you seen white fragility on a personal level, on a more local level, whether in your neighborhood, whether where you work, where you go to church, where you shop? Have you seen anything like that?
I think it's all around us. I don't.
Can you point to an instance where you saw it?
I probably can't. If somebody else will take the mic for a minute, I'll see if I can think of some specific situations.
Sure.
Share.
How about you, Mary, James?
Really, if you're talking about people getting upset and
Slights.
thinking that there was some preferential treatment because of the Afrocentric nature, I could recall in 1992 when I first arrived here, and the Chancellor, Irma Johnson, told me that there was a reverse discrimination complaint filed. And it just so happened I was shadowing the very person. This person was about 80 years old, who really had been around for a long time. And it was so paradoxical because I did postdoc at the school where he, didn't complete or was rejected from the doctorate program.
Got it.
And he was saying that my credentials were inferior to his, and that they were showing preferential treatment toward him.
Okay.
Preferential treatment toward me, and really technically not taking into consideration that he was the better candidate.
Okay.
And it was so funny that I shadowed him, and the chancellor had to remind me that, okay, be careful. And I didn't know what she meant until later. But the fact that I had a doctorate, I got a doctorate, did 2 postdoctorates, had a master's degree, and an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree, and he only had a master's degree, and he failed out of a doctorate program. Yet and still, he said I was inferior to him.
Okay. I was thinking of the recent events on campuses with blackface, and whether or not that may trigger some rage that these students say, "Hey, I ought to be able to do what I want to do. I don't see the problem." That sort of thing. What are your thoughts? Any black rage there? Any white rage or white fragility there with students being able to feel comfortable putting on blackface and then saying, "Oh, I apologize, didn't really mean any harm"?
But I think that's the issue, is that, there is freedom of speech.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yes.
but at the same time, there's also cultural sensitivity and racial sensitivity and respecting what may hurt someone else. And I think as a society, we don't do that.
Okay.
It's, well, that's not my problem, so I don't have to worry about that. But that's what causes issues.
Okay.
Ignoring it and maybe not having the attitude of, well, I should be able to do whatever I want to do regardless of the effects. But okay, let's talk about blackface. What is it really? And why do you deem it to be offensive? Or why is it offensive? And maybe educating yourself, as Stacey had said earlier, educating oneself to know why it would be offensive.
Sure.
And not doing it if you already know why it's offensive.
Okay. Stacey?
Well, the governor of Virginia responded to this incident in sort of a shocking way, at first admitting it and then denying it, and then trying to explain that perhaps he didn't realize that this would be offensive at the time, and he should have known. He was a grown man in medical school. He should have known that would have been offensive, and that he is still in office at this point. There have been a lot of people who have called for him to step down, and he's still in office.
Yeah.
Well, I my feeling was that where I work at, it was minimized as being no big thing. So why, get all upset? It happened years and years ago.
30 years, 40 years,
And so why even debate it? And, some people made jokes out of it. I had one black person say they were going to paint themselves white and wear a Klansman robe. And I don't want to mention who that was.
Right.
Turnabout's fair play.
And see if there was equitability there. Sanders don't see that as funny.
To me, Mary, what you were talking about, the part about it's not my problem or it doesn't affect me, I think that's a pretty big point in itself. I think if you take the scenario out of the politically charged context, the flip side of it is I think a lot of what the conversation we're trying to have is, and I'm not siding for or against the governor of Virginia. I don't know what his motive. I don't know his heart. But in general, I think what we're trying to achieve, at least from my perspective or my view, is that I want people to have the freedom to rethink their position. I want them to have the freedom to say, there are things that I've done in the past that were wrong, and they were based on unintentional or intentional ignorance or inaccurate understanding or training by someone else who believed a way that was inaccurate or negligent or what have you. But I would like to see there be some room for. I don't mean allowing people to get away with things without consequences, but I do want folks to have an opportunity to re-examine the way that they think, the way that they act, and the way they feel about certain things, and recognize that historically they've been wrong and need to change. And so, that would always be something that I would hope that we could have as a thread of our conversation.
Stacy, you seem to nod.
Well, I just wonder, how could a safe place be created where that could happen, where people could be honest about those kinds of discussion, those kinds of topics, and forgiving? It seems like we're far from that right now.
I think the acceptance and humility. People really technically want to erase the past and minimize, again, I'm saying that word again, the fact that there was a lot of cruel things done at the turn of the century. And slavery did exist, and black people were considered less than equal, and laws and such as black codes were perpetuated, and the legal system condoned a lot of the actions of some of our white brothers who were cruel. And we gloss over it instead of reliving it to an extent where we would understand better and develop a greater level of sensitivity, as opposed to totally eradicating, taking that out of history. Our history is very important, and putting it in perspective, both for black, white, and brown and yellow. All should know the history and teach it accordingly. I've been in the business of education for 50 years, completing 50 years in July, and I should say almost 50 years.
Okay.
And I have seen that there's been little or no significant change in the curriculum design in terms of infusing the true history of America.
Yes. Whether public school or college?
That public school or college, and I think that's criminal.
I'd like to get one more thing about the book that you appreciated, about the author and the book on white fragility. What's a significant thing that you saw in the book that you appreciated about the author bringing it out?
There were a couple things that really made me think. One, she redefines what racism is. And she says, really, what we need to do is we need to admit that everyone is racist, that we live in a society that is constructed in a way that's racist, and that makes all of us racist. And so instead of equating racism with evil, we need to be okay with having uncomfortable discussions. And if the discussions are uncomfortable, then that means we're doing something right. Then that means we're learning.
I think one of the greatest things that I think that was brought out in the book is that truly race is a social construct, not a reality. And where do we go in terms of educating people to that effect? And creating lines of demarcation between human beings is asinine. And that we should approach it and accept that we all in some way are racist and deal with it, and not pull things from the air to justify their behavior. Hey, let's work on it, let's talk about it. Let's be humble, let's be diplomatic in our approach, and really technically speaking, and get away from the blame game, but just tell the truth.
Chris, Mary, either one of you have an idea of one of the most important things you got from the book?
Mine would probably be similar to what Dr. V said, and just that, not pointing fingers
Yes.
and really moving forward with addressing the issue and becoming more comfortable with discussing, racism. And I mean, I do agree with the, all of us in some way, shape, or form have some form of racism within us. And if we have more of these discussions, have more of these table talks, without it being in a situation where, things get heated. And that way we can realize, okay, well, you know what, in those conversations, you realize, oh, we are alike. You can find common ground. So I think the book does a good job of that.
And I don't mean to be dodging your question. I have spent most of my time reading the White Rage book, and so I'm trying to hesitate to comment on material that I'm not as familiar with.
Well, not a problem. How about this? When did you become comfortable in talking about race issues, Chris? When did you become comfortable?
When my family blended, and my father married an African American woman with 2 children. That obviously were black, and I don't want to take the whole time talking about it, man, we had to come to terms because on the one side, we really enjoyed, I went to their high school, so I was the new kid, and so nobody knew me, and I could remember walking down the hallway, and my little sister would be talking to one of her friends, and they didn't know about our family integration operation, and they would say, well, who's that you're talking to? And she'd go, oh, him, that's my brother. And they'd look at her like she'd lost her mind, and we'd go on about the day, and then the same kid would come over to our house, and we're sitting around the table eating cereal, watching He-Man, and they'd say, well, why is he here? And sis would say, I told you, that's my brother. And so there are things, we just had to figure it out. There are things like for us, there's a continuum of things that in my family, that those that are African American can say things to each other that I don't feel comfortable saying and don't say. And there are things that I say to the Anglo part of my family that they wouldn't be comfortable saying and don't say. And so we were kind of forced into a living laboratory, so to speak. And I don't mean it to sound so clinical, but I mean, we had to live it every day, and we had to figure it out. I mean, my stepbrother and I, and I don't call him my step really, but my brother and I had to figure out, I mean, we went fisticuffs a couple of times because in high school, mullets were popular, and I had beautiful, long, short in the front, long in the back.
Okay.
And
sorry.
No, not at all.
Generation.
I was thinking fruit or something.
That'll come to play.
I think we're a hippie, man.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, I was quite fond of my hair. And it was, anyway. But I can remember one day getting out of the shower and grabbing my hairbrush and going to brush my hair. And guess what was all in my hairbrush? This greasy substance. Because my brother
used it.
put his activator in my hairbrush, and I was madder than a wet cat because I had to go get the Palmolive, the dish soap to wash this grease out of my hair. And so these are conversations that we had to have. We had to figure it out.
Sure.
And so, I would say I got really comfortable around the age of 14.
How about you, Stacey? When did you become comfortable talking about race issues?
I think it's uncomfortable, but I think it's good to talk about them. And as a teacher, I can remember, I think we've come a long way in the classroom, and I've seen a change with my students. Around 2000, when I taught the novel Beloved, Toni Morrison's Beloved, the response from a lot of students was, why are we talking about slavery? Why are we talking about this? We've come so far. This is the past. This isn't who we are now. And in the classroom, when discussions about race come up, And I think they should come up because I think the classroom is a safe place where people can respect each other's perspectives, and where you can actually encounter people who, different perspectives, folks who might come from different backgrounds, different races, different countries, and where sometimes we don't have those encounters outside the classroom. It can be a safe place. But what I see now, there's no question that it's still an issue now. We've come so far, it seems like. Now people do say, oh, yes, we have a race problem in the United States. We need to talk about it.
And I consider myself the most senior here, 72 years of age. At the age of 72, I did experience the separate water fountains, and
Buses.
going behind the building to get your food.
Get your food, yeah.
Instead of going through the front door.
Bus
I experienced
sitting.
all those things. I experienced, Klan harassing our neighborhood. But one thing they didn't do, they didn't mess with Crazy Mac, my grandfather. He was a World War I, and they said, well, we can leave that blank alone because he's crazy, because he'll come out there with anything. But a pivotal time in terms of dealing with the race issues was this. Haven't experienced that, but having blendedness. Louisiana is known for having a whole lot of mulattoes.
Yes.
Now, I have relatives that are lighter and whiter than anybody at this table, and they say they're black. And I went to a high school that was majority mulatto. They used to go to the white movies, come back and laugh about it. They used to go to Klan rallies and bring back the cone and the sheet and laugh about it.
Yeah.
It was a joke.
Yeah.
We lived close to each other in close proximity. And then when integration came about, there was really an onslaught of people wanting to experiment with each other. And that is interracial marriages and of course the courting. And so many of the young people, like my brother who's 61 and is a BA doctor, the naivety was there. And the things in the past that I experienced pretty much were minimized. And, oh, no, did you really experience that? Even teaching here, I had students ask me, oh, you got to be lying. So this remembering that and bringing that to reality, and really truly, I like the whole idea that, it's a social construct, because you see so many black people who look like white people, etc., and vice versa, until the blendedness is so profound. If you look at my family, we have the array from my father and my grandfathers. We have the array of the Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Negroid. And just the blendedness, and I love the blendedness, and it's great to have that. And even though when my brother brought home his white girlfriend who was in medical school, she said, Lord, why you black dudes first thing you do is get a white woman? And I said, Mama, that's racist. That ain't racist. That's the truth. No, I said, but later on, she loved her.
Yes. Okay.
She loved her. And I'm just saying that even though they didn't marry, she loved her.
If I could, Dr. V and I have had some great conversations.
Minnesota mulatto brother?
Yes, sir. And that's a term of endearment. So I appreciate it. One of the things that I want to say is that I tend to be a pretty relational person, and one of the things you guys have me thinking about, old times and my family growing up, and there were some difficult times for me, and during those times, Ma was there, and when I say Ma, I'm talking about my stepmom, and I really don't feel that way about her because there were times when I didn't feel like I had anybody else that was going to have my back, and she had my back. And so and she will still to this day, even in front of her own kids, she'll say, Chris, you were always the pride of the fleet. And so she was willing to invest in me and have my back at a time. And so I say all that just kind of in preface that for those that might be listening that aren't familiar, one of the things that is very, very important to Ma is the story of Emmett Till. And so for those of you that are unfamiliar, I just want to say that out loud so that you can get on the internet and do some reading and understand some of the severity and the horrible, I just can't think of another word, it just horrible, horrible things that were done to black people. And Emmett Till arguably kicked off the civil rights movement in America in a brand new way. But I just really want you to look at the pictures to see what some folks did in the name of racism to, I don't know him. I've seen pictures of him. He's an adorable little boy. And he was 14 years old, and they dragged him out of his house and did some unspeakable things to him, killed him and threw him in a river tied to a fan. And a few days later, some people found him. And so get the details, and please have the courage to look at the pictures. It's not going to be at all pleasant, but that's one of the things that's near and dear to Ma's heart. And so because of my love for her and because of she's always taking care of me, I just kind of want to chime in a little bit about that.
I got you.
I stand corrected. I made a mistake. My brother did marry an Anglo girl.
Okay.
Sorry, I said they didn't marry,
But they did.
they did marry.
Well, that's okay.
It did. It just didn't last.
It didn't last. Okay. In what way has white rage, the book itself, the idea of white rage, is it used to return us to a time that many Americans may think is a simpler time, is a more pleasant time? Is white rage a way of trying to turn the clock back?
Well, I don't know if I see that at all. I experience that book as a very polemic work that's designed to be an abrasion and to cause you to have to unavoidably deal with some stark truth.
Okay.
I think about, well, the slogan of a recent presidential campaign, Make America Great Again. And a lot of people wore that hat proudly and thought, yes, we did have a simpler time. But then when you deconstruct that, when you look a little bit deeper, you think, well, what would you want to go back to? Do we want to go back to a time before women could vote? Do we want to go back to a time when we had slavery or before civil rights? I mean, what is it that makes people think that was such a great time?
That's a nice point.
How much of a change have you seen in younger whites, that is, those millennials? Have our school system helped them understand America's true history? Mary?
Honestly, I mean, I feel that it has a lot to do with maybe the location of the school, the demographics of the school. I have a high schooler right now. She goes to a school. She's a freshman, and her school, I would say, I think my husband said he looked it up, and it's like 48% African American at her school. And so that is the majority. And my daughter is mixed. So her father is black. So for me, I like that. And when we went and met teachers, there are teachers that look like her.
Okay.
And I appreciate that. I like that. But if you put your kid in a school in an area that may not have, mixed demographics and, people who look different than what they look like. And if you have teachers that may not be comfortable with addressing certain things, then, we're not getting anywhere with our younger with our younger people unless they're being educated at home, unless those conversations are being had at the dinner table. And nowadays, there's not a lot of conversations being had at the dinner table.
Yeah,
because people are on their phones.
That's right. They're either on their phone or they're not having family dinner.
Discussion. Yeah, it's discussion. You have to have
That's
conversations. And I have those conversations with my teenager for sure. I have a 2-year-old. We don't have those conversations yet, but we will. But I do have those conversations, and I have a lot of conversations with my husband at home about these things because, he faces things in the workforce that a lot of other people may not face. So yes, I do think that it's our job as parents, for sure. For at least me, I know I have these conversations with my daughter, and I think she does have conversations with her friends, but if it's not being presented to them by an adult, whether it's teacher, whether it's some type of administrator, or at home, then we're not educating them on how to help this problem. Epidemic, really.
Go ahead, James.
Well, I could say that the young folks are great. Having experienced racism to its core and seeing it now, anybody who says that it hasn't been any change, they're not being honest. There's a significant amount of change, but we still have a long way to go. But one thing that I do have difficulty with is some are so naive and they play with the N-word a lot. I see them calling the N this, N that, and the rap. I mean, the kids rapping and using the N, and sometimes they don't know the significance and what that truly represents.
Which kids?
The campus kids.
Okay, regardless of race, or only run one race?
Yeah, well, you have white and black kids playing the rap music real loud and using. I even had some white kids across the street, but they were a blended group. I'm sorry. They stayed across the street, but they're a blended group. And they used the N-word on each other. And they were multicolored.
Yes.
Every brown, black. But they minimized it. But every now and then I would hear them say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," which means that they knew about it. I think they take it for granted. And some of the groups I've run, juvenile groups, I noticed that they do the same thing. But it was a cruel past, a profoundly cruel past, and I'm glad that it's a better day. And I think the sacrifices of the people who were on the front lines, and I could say that I had to throw a brick and hide my hand because my father said, "You better not go out there and demonstrate." But my grandfather, who was in World War I, said, "Hey, well, let's go out there, Moody. We're gonna do that." We marched on Walgreen, Kresge, and then I run back home and didn't tell Daddy. And my grandfather was just a rebel. They called him Crazy Mac. And he took risks. He was a railroad man. He took risks. The humbleness I got from my father, who looked white and could pass, and my grandfather, who black as tar in Port Indian, was the rebel, and I got a kind of a mixture of the two.
Of the two.
And that created my personality, and really, technically speaking, I could appreciate people of all races loving each other because we have it in our family.
Have any of you seen any benefit to hip-hop artists using the N-word in a more, to have society have less negative effects by it? Do you see any of that?
I don't know. The way you said, I know you didn't mean it that way, but in my mind, what I was thinking when you said it was, is there any benefit to normalizing pathological behavior? And so, to me, I don't know. And maybe it's just where I am in life.
You mean as an older person or what?
Mature.
Oh, pardon me, mature.
I'm just kidding.
Hold on, I just knocked my cane over. Get my grabber and pick that up. But to me, it's just, I feel really awkward even just hearing folks flip that around as if it doesn't have any historical meaning. And on the one hand, I'll kind of can argue with you a little bit and say, it has brought it to the forefront and it has caused some conversations to happen. I'm not sure that was their motive or intent, but on the other hand, it really has some despicable roots to it. So I can't ignore that either.
But the naivety,
The ignorance, the not knowing.
more ignorance than naivety. I could say this. There's one Harvard professor that was doing an experiment, hoping to use the N-word, where they would inundate people in terms of its use, with the hope that it was totally neutral and didn't have any negative effect. Because truly he believed that the N-word didn't apply to black folks, but really technically it could apply to anybody.
Okay.
And that the use of it, it has moved more toward an endearment by the collective multicultural group, the younger group. I think that's positive. And saying it more as a term of endearment, but at the same time, being 72 years of age, old tapes roll.
Right.
But in a way, I say it's positive because they're disassociated with race and the legacy of racism and race. Because really, truly, race is a social construct, and that little term is not applicable.
Stacy, Mary?
We've talked about this in one of my classes. There was a pretty lively discussion about it.
Yeah.
One student said that he thought when the N-word was used in rap music that it took the power out of that word. And then another student disagreed and said the fact that it's used in rap music is a bad influence, that other people say it too much. And it brings to mind a couple of recent high-profile cases in the area where some high school students, there was one case, we won't mention what school, but there was one case where some students who had probably been drinking took a video of themselves and posted it, and they were saying the N-word over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it was horrifying to a lot of parents, to school administrators, school teachers, who thought, where is this coming from? And then there was a separate incident, and it made the whole community really take a close look and say, what can we do? We need to raise awareness. And I think it's what you were saying, Dr. B, that the students were naive.
Very naive.
And that was deleted, but it did not disappear.
I went to UNT graduation, and I was sitting behind a multicultural group, and they were laughing at some of their friends graduating, and they would refer to them, both black and white, as the N's. And they were multicultural. Look at that N. Look at that N. Oh, look, he stumbled. Look at that. I mean, casually using it, and regardless as to what the color of the graduating UNT person was.
That's what I was going to say. When you said that, I do feel like some of the younger generations use it as a term of endearment. So, and that's where it can get real gray because it originates from something that's not pleasant. That was a hateful term. But I do agree with the professor from Harvard that now if you look at what it means, ignorant, well, a lot of people walk this earth that are very ignorant, but we don't use that specific term to say that.
Why should we accept it?
We shouldn't, right?
Throw it out the window.
No.
How about this? And I'm only making this analogy because we're winding up on our time. Is there a connection between the use of that word and the use of the word that is meant typically to demean women? The B word. We've said the N word, not the B word. And what I'm indicating is the trajectory of let's do something new with this word there too, so that it takes the sting out of it, so that when you say it toward any woman and you say it to a man, which you usually when the B word is said to a man is to demean him by taking away his maleness and indicating he's a female, and that ain't a pleasant thing for a lot of guys. So all I'm asking is what's happening with the N word similar to what's happening? I'm sorry, what's happening with the B word similar to what's happening with the N word?
Yeah, I could say this. You better not say that in my at my house or where I was raised.
Sure.
You get knocked out.
Okay.
That's right.
The female is considered the ultimate symbol of respect.
Okay.
Bringing life into the world.
Yes.
My father said, you better respect every female that's walking because they give life. And life is superior. And really technically, my father thought females were superior to males.
I'll tell you right now, just imagine playing that through in my head. I cannot imagine a situation in which I would have that much of a loss of consciousness and an absence of lucidity that word would come out of my mouth towards my mother. That would no.
Well, yeah, but in a public way, the D word is being used out there a lot.
Right, and that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
I think that it's being used lightly. It's just another it's being used as just another word, everyday use word, and it shouldn't be. I mean, but it is. And somewhere along the line, it got switched. It did. Somewhere along the line, it went from being inappropriate to not.
Okay. Stacy, please.
Just like the N word.
I can't follow that.
You may not follow it, but I promise you, it's happening every day.
I mean, I can't go after you. That was just you.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally happening. I mean, if you hear it's happening in high schools.
So does that mean that we're having less words to worry about nowadays?
Females are saying it to females as a form of endearment.
Yeah. So
that's my B. That's my ride or die.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just that's the term of endearment. Just like dudes.
So if a society wants to have really wonderful things to look forward to, isn't that a thing to look forward to so that we have fewer words to denigrate each other's? What do you think, Jay? I mean, Jay.
Well, thanks for muffling me. Because I run my mouth too much. They call me motor mouth.
It takes a lot to back you up, boss.
But I hear both black and white females and brown females use that word so casually.
Yeah.
I mean, in my office, that blank blank, that blank blank. I said, hey, chill out, baby, chill out. But they use it so casually.
Yes.
And I agree that it's almost like the N word. It's just casual.
Okay, so now society is able to say, okay, we've neutralized those two words. Now we have two less words to hurt people with. Ain't that good? What do you think, Stacey? Hold on.
Personally, maybe I'm guilty occasionally of using the B word lightly.
Not the Stewie.
But the N word, that's too.
You're going to throw some poetry, Nika Giovanni poetry on it, huh?
I mean, sometimes in traffic, you might.
I'm more the M&F type.
I was going to say, I've got another set of colorful metaphors and similes I use for that.
Well, look here. We're closing in, and here's what I wanted to know. Until we have public school and colleges having more of a greater handle on the true history of America, so that more students will, understand our commonality and our true history. What's the hope? Is it solely that we look to white parents to just say, okay, let me educate you on this? Is it solely that?
One of the things that they teach us in Counseling 101 is if that someone keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again, it means they're not being heard. And so what I'm saying is we've got to slow down and stop and start listening to one another, kind of like what we've done today. I think on one hand, I'm excited and it's with a great deal of joy that we're doing what we're doing. On the other hand, I'm annoyed because we're still here having to do this and give people permission to have difficult conversations. And maybe I think too much like a counselor. Maybe that's, not reasonable. But to me, it's all about listening to one another and assigning some value to another person's experience and perception and caring about what they've seen, particularly when it's different from what you've seen.
And I think it's important to know the past and move forward and talk about the past, but let's not get stuck in the past.
Right.
Let's move forward and create a more humanistic approach toward caring for each other and infusing all of our experiences and respecting all our experiences in every way of life. And this is the first step. And I'd like to commend you, Brother Jim Perry and
Cut it out.
Brother Sanders, for really bringing us together
That's right.
and to
Absolutely.
talk about this. And I think that basically the administration of TCC and other colleges, be it black HBCUs or Anglo institutions, should do something like this where we would promote humility and respect and the love of all.
Stacey, I wanted to see if you can imagine a kind of scene that you would like to see happen on a regular basis away from colleges, in a neighborhood, at a community center, how people can actually talk to each other and they know that they may be encountering a difference, but they still are willing. Can you imagine such a scene? Can you think of how people can have this tough conversation away from academia? Can you imagine that? Sounds like it's tough to imagine.
It is. It is very tough to imagine. As a teacher, I do very much appreciate the classroom as a safe place where folks in the community can, from all different backgrounds, can come together
Yes.
and can share their perspectives.
Yes.
Outside of academia, sometimes it seems like we're so polarized. And then there's also a denial as well, sometimes about racism or racial biases. I think just it would be nice to have more middle ground conversations, safe places like the classroom outside of academia to have these kinds of conversations.
I appreciate you just because Stacey. I think your classroom is unique, and what I mean by that is I don't know that every classroom is safe to have this conversation, and I would challenge those that are in charge of classrooms to develop some openness and maybe even a skill set to having this kind of safety for this conversation.
And I can tell you, having taught here and other institutions, 4 institutions, that trying to deal with that domain of prejudice, racism, and historical facts in reference to slavery and et cetera, and the meaning of women, et cetera, everything that we are so consciously putting in perspective now. People are treating it like walking on eggshells, and sometimes overly sensitive and overly punitive, and not having a sense of forgiveness when we slip.
Okay.
And I think but we must do it. When I taught psychology, I always infused a module on prejudice and racism. I got a couple of complaints, but Dr. Crow, who was the president, said, "Oh man, I blew that off." But I've seen in other cases where when Dr. Crow left, it wasn't Dr. Dawes, but that was maybe a dean or two that was a little bit,
Timid?
uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
Because of one or two students saying, "Oh, he taught black psychology the whole time," and I had only 2 weeks of a module on racism and prejudice. And I think it would be really malpractice for me not to cover in a psychology of adjustment or general psychology class
That's good. That's right.
an issue on prejudice and racism.
Stacy?
Some faculty members, I've heard faculty members say that they are afraid to talk about anything controversial in class.
Yes.
They're afraid that conversation could go wrong, that they might get fired, something bad would happen. They
gotcha.
don't feel safe.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth the risk. I don't think
Yeah.
as teachers that we
Worth the
can
risk.
give, I think we have to take the risk
to be
to
mavericks.
open up. And we can do it in a way where we are
Yes.
facilitating conversation, where we are not, where we're drawing students out to say what they think instead of acting as if we're the experts.
Imposing.
Yes.
How about this? Is there something that white parents can do that they haven't done in the past that would help alleviate or eliminate racist behavior, to address it, to make their child more aware? Is there something a white parent can do?
Absolutely. I would
just
say
name a thing, just one thing.
be willing to be uncomfortable and find one concrete thing to change about yourself, even if it's just, hey, we're going to talk about this at the dinner table tonight.
To at least have a discussion in the house, at the table, and if they can't find a table, find a moment when.
Absolutely. But along with having the conversation, be willing to be uncomfortable.
Okay. All right. Mary, what do you
Well,
think?
I was thinking too, and maybe sometimes it's just exposing yourself to a different culture. You know,
Like in
like
what way?
okay, like go to a black church.
Okay.
You know, instead of going to your regular Baptist church, go to an all black church.
Fall asleep the next week.
Put yourself in an uncomfortable position
That's
where
correct.
you are
That's
where
great.
you
Great
are the
idea.
minority,
Wow.
where you are the oddball out.
Wow.
And that way that'll make, and then you'll see maybe a small glimpse
Okay.
of what their way of thinking is. Yeah, put yourself in a position where you're the only one there, and take your whole family. You know, something like that. That would really get them to feel it.
When I was in the military,
That's a good point. I was just going.
you gonna talk about that?
Go ahead.
I was a race relation equal opportunity officer, and the training consisted of 4 months continuous active duty, or you had an alternative, do a month and you did a cohort and you correspond and with all that stuff, like all that good stuff. But you did your internship in a culture that was different. And you did 2 internships. And race relations equal opportunity, it became a better department. And on the Air Force side, it was called social actions.
Right.
And really technically speaking, after removing a colonel from his position with a major by way of a 3-star, they tore up my car, so they had to provide me a safe place in St. Joe, Missouri, Jesse James country,
Right.
of all places, as an Air Force officer. So really, I've had the experience in 1977 of a horrific event in trying to promote equitability in the military through REO, Race Relations Equal Opportunity, and social actions. And where I had to go from one green color to blue color. And I like the blue color. I like the Air Force better.
Of course you did. Now, I know we're trying to wrap up here and bring this thing in for a landing, but Dr. V opened the door, and so I'm walking through. I just, for all of my fellow veterans that have an opportunity to have heard this podcast, I think we do this really well, and I think we can set a standard and provide an example for the rest of the culture groups, either on campus or wherever you're hearing this. But I think we know how to figure out how to get along and understand each other and have difficult conversations, because Frankly, we were forced into them just because of close quarters sometimes. But I'm calling on us vets. I want us to to be part of the light and show the way about how to do this.
Thanks, Chris. Stacy, one last comment, one last thought.
I think we can all make a difference when we can see when the right time is. Occasionally we might hear someone say something, perhaps they don't mean anything. It's so easy to not set the record straight or to be silent and let something go. And I think we all need to hold ourselves to the task of when we hear something, see something inappropriate, that we need to stand up and say something.
When you see something wrong, then say something.
Yeah.
Okay? Mary, you got anything to send us on out?
Yeah, I just kind of going back to Chris and like defining like his family tree and
Yeah.
the dynamics
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
I think there was an important message in there when the guy at school was like, "Wait, y'all are
Who was that? Yeah.
because it didn't fit." Right? You're not supposed to be brother and sister.
Right.
That's not how it doesn't look like that.
Right.
They don't go like that.
Yeah, right?
But
But see, that's the beauty of it,
Uh-huh.
is that it's anything you want it to be.
Yes.
America is anything
Right.
we want it to be, right? And that's why people want to come here and live that American dream,
Okay.
right? Because America is anything we make it to be.
Sure.
So that goes the same thing with ethnicity, race, cultures. It's whatever we make of it.
Okay.
My mother's Hispanic, full Mexican. My father's Polish. My whole life, people always said, "What are you? What are you?" I'm a human being. That's all that matters. The rest, that's for another day. But the point is that if we can just get beyond that painted picture of what we think it's supposed to look like,
Yes.
I think that will also help.
Okay.
Move us along.
Dr. Bernardo, can you help us out when the last comment, and we'll go.
Well, I think this experience has been great, and I would ditto with Dr. Stewie and Mrs. Huggins about their multicultural experiences, and also the fact that we should be more progressive in our approaches in teaching and really educating, advisement, and counseling of the multicultural aspects of American society and how beautiful America is. I've been to 51 countries, and America is still the greatest country. And I'll die for America, and I'll die for my brothers, black, white, green, yellow, whatever. Because a person is a person, and love transcends color. And people need to be taught that. Love transcends color.
That's right.
Brother Sanders, love transcends color. And that's what we need, love and humility. And empathy, understanding,
Yes.
and listening
Yep.
with diplomacy. I've converted Ku Klux Klansmen to altruists. So, it's a matter of approach.
Again, our guest, Dr.
They're on
Stewie,
probation, though.
Mrs. Huggins, Mr. Hunt, Dr. Bernardo. Again, thank you so very much for being on the podcast. I just am hopeful that folks got something either from what the book talked about, how you viewed what information it was trying to give, and some of the experiences that they've provided us to let us know about how hopeful America and Texas can be. Again, thank you very much for being on our Texas podcast.
Okay.
See you later. Bye.
You're going to put all that. Your picture.
Can you take a picture of him?
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm about to do.
Okay, okay.